Live from Columbia, South Carolina, this is a special edition of Meet the Press with Tim Russell.
Our issues this Sunday: Obama wins Iowa.
Thank you, Iowa.
Clinton wins New Hampshire.
Let's give America the kind of comeback that New Hampshire has just given me.
Next stops, Nevada and South Carolina. Our Meet the Candidates 2008 series continues. An exclusive interview with Democrat Hillary Clinton. For 12 years, she was the First Lady of the state of Arkansas. For 8 years, the First Lady of the United States. And in 2000, was elected the United States Senator from New York. This morning, Hillary Clinton joins us for the full hour on Meet the Press.
Senator Clinton, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thanks, Tim. It's good to be with you.
When we arrived in South Carolina yesterday, this was the state newspaper and the headlines that greeted us, and let me share it with you and our viewers. A Clinton camp hits Obama, attacks painful for black voters, many in state offended by criticism of Obama and remarks about Martin Luther King. Bob Herbert in the New York Times columnist weighed in this way. I could also sense how hard the Clinton camp was working to undermine Senator Obama's main theme, that a campaign based on hope and healing could unify rather than further polarize the country. So there was the former president chastising the press for the way it was covering the Obama campaign and saying of Mr. Obama's effort, quote, the whole thing is the biggest fairy tale I've ever seen. And there was Mrs. Clinton telling the country we don't need, quote, false hopes, and taking cheap shots at, of all people, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We've already seen Clinton surrogates trying to implant the false idea that Mr. Obama might be a Muslim and perhaps a drug dealer to boot. What is this all about? Well,
beats me, because there's not one shred of truth in what you've just read, and I regret that, because obviously a lot of people have been given information or an impression that is absolutely false. First, with respect to Dr. King, Tim, I was 14 years old when I heard Dr. King speak in person. He is one of the people that I admire most in the world. The point that I was responding to from Senator Obama himself in a number of speeches he was making is his comparison of himself to President Kennedy and Dr. King. And there is no doubt that the inspiration offered by all three of them is essential. It is critical to who we are as a nation, what we believe in, the dreams and aspirations that we all have. But I also said that, Dr. King didn't just give speeches. He marched, he organized, he protested, he was gassed, he was beaten, he was jailed. He understood that he had to move the political process and bring in those who were in political power. And he campaigned for political leaders, including Lyndon Johnson, because he wanted somebody in the White House who would act on what he had devoted his life to achieving. So I think it's important to set the record straight. Clearly, we know from media reports that the Obama campaign is deliberately distorting this. And, I think we should just take a step out here for a minute. This is the most exciting election we've had in such a long time, because you have an African-American, an extraordinary man, a person of tremendous talents and abilities, running to become our president. You have a woman running to break the highest and hardest glass ceiling. I don't think either of us want to inject race or gender in this campaign. We are running as individuals. We are making our cases to the American people, and it's imperative that we get the record and the facts straight, because people are entitled to have that information. But I have no intention of either, doing something that would move this race in a wrong way, or, frankly, standing by when I think tactics are being employed that are not in the best interests of our country. And let me address the point that Bill was making, because, again, I think it's been unfairly and inaccurately characterized. What he was talking about was very directly about the story of Senator Obama's campaign being premised on a speech he gave in 2002. And that was to his credit. He gave a speech opposing the war in Iraq. He gave a very impassioned speech against it and consistently said that he was against the war, he would vote against the funding for the war. By 2003, that speech was off his website. By 2004, he was saying that he didn't really disagree with the way George Bush was conducting the war. And by 2005, 6, and 7, he was voting for $300 billion in funding for the war. The story of his campaign is really the story of that speech and his opposition to Iraq. I think it is fair to ask questions about, well, what did you do after the speech was over? And when he became a senator, he didn't go to the floor of the Senate to condemn the war in Iraq for 18 months. He didn't introduce legislation against the war in Iraq. He voted against timelines and deadlines initially. So I think it's important that we get the contrasts and the comparisons out. I think that's fair game. You know, I think that we don't want anyone, any of our supporters, anyone, and that's why in my campaign, anytime anybody has said anything that I thought was out of bounds, they're gone. You know, I've gotten rid of them. I have said that is not appropriate in this campaign. You know, when Senator Obama's chief strategist accuses me of playing a role in Benazir Bhutto's assassination, there's silence. So let's have one standard. This is an exciting and historic campaign. One of us is going to make history, which is thrilling to me. I've worked all my life on behalf of civil rights and women's rights and human rights, and so I want a good, vigorous campaign about the differences between us and our various qualifications and experiences to be the president that America needs.